All right. I'm so excited to welcome back to Direction, Not Perfection, Carrie Heller, licensed psychologist specializing in evaluation of ADHD and executive functioning. Welcome, Carrie.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Happy to be back.
Yeah, I was looking back at the last time we talked, and it was episode 151, which was like way back in, I think, 2022 somewhere. So we've had some time to digest your first episode, and now I'm just excited to have your wisdom back on the show. So are you ready to be challenged today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always up for a good challenge.
Perfect, perfect. The kickoff of this whole ADHD series that I'm doing with the podcast right now. And I want to take this deep dive into how ADHD can be affecting somebody who's setting out on this health journey and going like, why are the things that are working for the person over there not working for me? And so just to really start off with the basics for our listeners, can you even dive into ADHD versus like this executive functioning? I feel like the two terms come up a lot in the same sentence. And are they the same talk or is there a little difference between the two?
Yeah, that's a good question and definitely a good thing to start with. So basically, executive functioning issues are essentially issues with time management, organization, planning. Obviously, for those of you that know a fair amount of ADHD, that probably sounds just like ADHD. There's slightly different definitions sometimes of executive functioning, but the way that I conceptualize ADHD is that if you have ADHD, by default, you have executive function weaknesses because a lot of the symptoms related to ADHD also relate to executive functioning. At the same time, you can also have executive function issues without having ADHD. So, for example, if you have anxiety, depression, OCD, pretty much any mental health disorder usually has some sort of impairment in executive function skills. For example, if you're really anxious, it probably can lead to procrastination of getting stuff done. Or you're so taxed mentally that it's hard to plan effectively. Or if you're feeling really down, if you're depressed, then same thing, we're going to have a hard time focusing and planning and getting stuff done. So the executive functioning issues can occur for a wide variety of reasons. And again, there also are people that just maybe never learned a certain skill. If you have trouble with certain things, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a formal mental health disorder. In some cases, it may mean it's just not something you've really done before, or just never really learned how to quite do those particular skills. You think about ADHD a lot as issues with self-regulation. So challenge is kind of staying focused, sustaining attention. And for some people, also have a hard time with sitting still. So, fidgeting, want to get up a lot, doing things without thinking or saying things without thinking. Certainly from a perspective of trying to stick to, let's say, a certain lifestyle in terms of working out regularly, eating healthy, things like that. If you have a hard time with self-regulation, it would often make sense why trying to sort of stick with a certain diet or working out, things like that, might be kind of challenging.
Right. Which means we have to find different ways to get around it, right? Which I want to get to. But I also want to highlight, you mentioned like maybe we just haven't learned the skill yet. And I want to pick that apart for a second because what I've noticed with clients is that there's this frustration level of like, why am I just now exposed to I need to learn these skills? Like, why didn't this happen younger in life? And then like taming that frustration or giving the grace of it's okay that we're just learning it now. What's some of your talk around that?
Sure. But first of all, I think they're in the same way that most schools don't have study skills classes. People kind of learn how to study sort of by doing and little things here and there. Same thing. There's not really usually an executive function course in most schools as a kid. It's often you kind of learn by doing. And so I think some people pick up what to do and just through experience learn how to do these things very well. Others just really don't. Or maybe there are some weaknesses that are there. And then that also can contribute to just not really kind of getting it and being able to sort of execute things. But again, there's can be so many things that can impact executive functioning. It sometimes can be hard to know off the bat, like, why am I having trouble with this? But that's also why it's important sometimes to sort of play detective and try to figure out why am I having a hard time with this? Because that can also help lead to figure out how do I approach this to be able to follow through on things I want to follow through on.
Right. So let's throw out the word overwhelm that somebody is just going, I do feel like I'm just now learning all these skills for trying to approach food. The grocery store is totally overwhelming me. The idea of trying to put together any form of workout program or daily routine, like overwhelm comes up a lot. So what do you do? Like, how do you pull all of that overwhelm out and start to like pick it apart for some comfort?
Sure. So I think part of it is, doing some exploration to figure out what about that feels overwhelming. Is it that it's too many different steps to complete? Is it that the fear of making these big lifestyle changes itself is overwhelming? Because if you can identify what about it's overwhelming, then you can figure out how to make a plan as a starting point. Obviously, just because you make a plan doesn't mean you're going to follow through on it, but it's often a good starting point. But then also figuring out for some people, I don't know, let's say you make a plan for, I don't know, how to eat a certain way. That, some people, maybe it's here's a list of a couple different foods you should sort of weave into your diet. And for some people, they can sort of hold that in their mind and make sort of a plan without writing it down. For others, they need very detailed instructions to say for breakfast, I should eat X, Y, or Z, and to have like a day by day plan. And so I think you have to figure out where does someone kind of fall in terms of what do they need to reduce feeling overwhelmed.
Right. And I remember you saying this in the last episode that you have different tools even within your office. Like somebody can sit on a bike and bike while they're listening can help intentional. I could picture you working through a meal plan with somebody in your office and maybe while they're doing something else, like you're working with all of their pieces that could pull out some overwhelm. Is that accurate? And again, I know it's all individualized, but maybe for one person, it'd be super helpful in a session to get like the 5 items written down that they're going to go get at the grocery store and start there for even like a week or 2 or a month.
Yeah, and that's certainly something I work with people on is the idea of what to get, but also for people to get overwhelmed just going to the grocery store to look at, how do you organize the shopping list? So, for example, if maybe we make a list of here are the meals you want to make for the week in one list, and then to actually go to the grocery store to not only make a list of the ingredients, but to organize it by category. Or if we know the specific store, where in the store the items are, because then it may feel less overwhelming. It's the same thing. If you have 30 things on a shopping list, that might feel like a lot. But if you have, I don't know, 5 different categories and maybe you have 3 or 4 things per category, it may not feel as overwhelming.
Right.
But I think, going to your point about the different things to control the fidgeting and improving the focus, for some people, being able to do something while they're talking about it can reduce that feeling overwhelmed. So, for example, the desk bike or elliptical can be great. Other things like a balance board. This one's called a whirly board. This one's sort of a more fun one where you get to kind of spin around a little bit and can maneuver around. And so, whatever works, sometimes getting that physical movement in can help you to sort of tolerate that discomfort of talking through it. So even if it's very stressful to make the plan, having that physical movement in while you're doing it can be helpful. Plus, if you're trying to make a plan to focus on your health, you're getting physical activity in while you're doing it.
Right. Exactly. It's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess this is the hope piece of this conversation. If somebody is having all of that overwhelm and they've really never been able to stick to a fitness or nutrition type plan, that maybe they just haven't picked apart the right area or figured out the right plan or grabbed the right professional to work with them. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I think for the most part, first of all, if you have the mindset of as long as I keep trying to do something different, I keep working at it, I'm going to eventually be successful is very different than the idea I've tried everything, nothing's ever going to work. Because if you have a negative mindset, you're probably not going to get the results you want. But I think working with someone that, understands the challenges. For example, if I work with someone and I gave them the super complicated plan of what to do, if they can't follow it, it's not really helpful. But also being open with that person to say to them, I have a hard time with X, Y, Z. I really need, very detailed step-by-step instructions on what to do. If we're working with someone on an ongoing basis, to also take a step back and let's say you have an appointment, you set up a plan and they come back and they have a hard time following through to try to pick apart why didn't it work? So was it, for example, that they didn't have time to do the meal prep? So they couldn't execute and they didn't know what to do when they didn't have time to make it. They couldn't figure out, here's this ready-made stuff that still fits in well enough. So kind of having sort of a plan A and a plan B so that when stuff doesn't work, or to recognize that maybe the meal prep is not something that works well for them in the current circumstances. So maybe they need to figure out ways to have stuff that's made for them in some ways, or that's less time intensive to make possibly is one example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is where the whole giving oneself grace, you don't have to go create the whole meal, shop for the whole thing. Sometimes it just starts super simple and then build on it. That comes to mind with that. Yeah. I want to let you in on a conversation that was happening the other day. And if you were part of it, where you would have jumped in and been like, okay, I have a thought around this. So I was going back and forth with some voice memos with the client, and she was going, I'm feeling so overwhelmed because I feel like I can't see the whole picture of where this is going. Even though I know what I'm fighting for, I can't see how it's all going to fit together. And I came back saying, well, let's look at it as a puzzle. And we're working on different puzzle pieces. And maybe we just have the corner pieces so far and we're trying to fill in the edge pieces. And then she came back and she was like, so my puzzle pieces are everywhere. Some are out on the front lawn, some are in a bedroom, some are in a drawer. I don't even know where to find my puzzle pieces. If you were to dive in on that, where would you be like, whoa, whoa, whoa?
Well, I mean, maybe I'd start by saying, what does the picture on the box of the puzzle look like? The idea
That's
of like,
scary.
usually if it's a puzzle, you have a sense of what it looks like, but you have to figure out how to get the pieces to fit together to get there. And so basically by starting with the finished product, so it's the idea of maybe, what do you look like physically? How do you feel physically? Are certain health issues under control better? Like having a concrete picture of what is it that you're trying to achieve? Because I think if you don't really know what you're trying to achieve, it does make it hard to be as motivated to do it. And I think also some people really need to see, here's why doing this makes sense. Like others can follow it blindly, but if they don't really understand the rationale, it may be hard to be motivated to keep working at it. So for example, with puzzles, like some people for complex puzzles will use a puzzle tray where basically organize them into parts. So think about it as kind of here are the different sort of parts. So maybe it's exercise, diet, reducing stress. Pick a couple of different categories and look at individually what's the big picture, but then what are the individual things you need to do to essentially organize those individual pieces to then put them together with everything else.
Thank you. This is so good. Thank you for humoring me on this. I like seeing where your brain goes with that. Okay, so we're always coming back to the individual's why they care, what's their big picture looking like. And then I saw on one of your articles, you're really good at like asking the questions is like, how is this also affecting your life? Or like, what do you want out of this? What are some typical conversations you're having in office with some of your clients? Can you think of some of your health related, more somebody who is and they're fighting for more health versus I know you kind of cover the whole span with ADHD, but
Yeah. I mean, if someone's having a hard time, I guess, getting started with a workout routine, for example, the question I'd ask them is, why do you want to work out? I mean, usually there's a reason. I mean, sometimes it's just my doctor said I need to do it. It's healthy. I feel better when I do it. I need to lose weight. I need to get my cholesterol down. Like whatever it is, there's usually a reason someone wants to start doing something. So then the question becomes, so these are the reasons. So let's look at, clearly there's a motivation to do it. So then let's look at what barriers are stopping you. So is an issue of time. Do you not have enough time that you can carve out to do it? Or, I mean, one of the things I hear quite a bit is if someone says, I typically work out for an hour. And if they say, I don't know, something happens and I lose track of time and I only will have 45 minutes, then I don't bother doing it because I can't get the full hour in. So then looking at how do you kind of have a deal plan, but also be realistic. So if the timing doesn't work exactly, it's still probably far better to get a 45-minute workout in than no workout.
right. Right. But then like building that belief system that
Right. And with
just
that is, the workout, it's also a matter of not just saying, oh, I have time allocated to work out, but to know exactly ahead of time what you're going to do. Because, one of the things that can be challenging is even if you want to work out, if you don't really know what kind of workout you're going to do. Like if you're weightlifting and you don't really have any idea of what exercise should I do, you may sit there and either be ready but not do anything or not bother going to the gym because you don't really know what exercise to do. Or if you think, oh, I could go for a run or I could do sit-ups. But having a plan before you actually start the workout each day can be really helpful. In the same way, a lot of people, if they're doing a workout routine, especially weightlifting, will have like a step-by-step plan of, these are the exercises I do, how many sets I do, because it's something tangible to follow.
Hmm. No, that's so good. It's reminding me of this episode that just happened, and we were calling it an entry point into a behavior change, and how the person thinks that the entry point is I need to get to the gym, where it is, in fact, to your point, it's okay, you needed to already have written down what you're going to do, even if it's just I'm going to do 20 minutes of running so that the brain fatigue of trying to figure out that component isn't there when you're hitting the go button on getting to the gym. So it's often those like small things that nobody ever gives credit to that's the big game changer to make the
Exactly. I mean,
behavior
one of the things
happen.
I often tell people with executive functioning work is that, and strategies, it's often not one big strategy that suddenly changes everything. It's a lot of small little ones you put together that really can bring about long-term change.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And then just again, bringing people along in their belief system that they do believe that because society is not shouting that at them.
Yeah.
So,
And I think one other piece in the workout example is so when you can find activities that are fun that you genuinely enjoy, because if it's something you enjoy doing, you're more likely to be motivated to do it. And if you can't find the activity itself enjoyable, like some people really don't like working out, but they know they should do it, the idea becomes create an external motivator. So, for example, a common one I'll recommend to people is if they're doing cardio, let's say on elliptical, to maybe have a TV show on Netflix that they're watching, but only watch an episode when they're at the gym working out, because then it creates that motivator to they want to keep watching the show as long as they can withhold watching it on their own. Then it gives them something to look forward to. So it creates an external motivator to work out.
Yes. Yes. But do you feel like your clients are pleasantly surprised how realistic you are on sending them out with their tasks? Do you, I don't know, like what's that like? I'm picturing somebody shoulders coming down and like, oh, this is such nice information. Like I can do that. And
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely get varied reactions, but yeah, a common one sort of this idea that these don't seem like these are far out mind blowing strategies. They're very realistic and practical. I think sometimes people sort of feel like, oh, why didn't I think of that myself? Obviously, to me, a lot of these come fairly naturally, but it's also, I think it's different when you're taking the time to sort of think outside yourself and create this awareness of what you're doing. You can really make a lot of changes where, when you're going through your day-to-day life, unless something's really not going well, you're probably not going to focus on, could I do this better? And so a lot of it's just taking that step back to really evaluate more globally what's going on. Like one of the best strategies I recommend to people, it's fairly simple, is think about the morning routine. If you have a hard time fitting everything in and you're stressed, rushing, take a step back. Look at the morning routine. Write down everything that you need to do in the morning from the time you get up until you go to work or do whatever you're going to do to start the day, and estimate how long each thing should take. Because if you look at that, if the time that it should take doesn't match how much time you actually have available, then that's the first part of the problem. So sometimes if you're not realistic in what you can actually fit into a certain time frame, it's not going to work. So then the next step there would be to figure out, can you get up earlier and allow more time for things? Can you do certain stuff at different times of the day to offset what you have to do? Or are there more efficient ways you could do things? I mean, for example, like if you pack lunches for your kids, could you put most of the stuff together the night before? Does that save time? From there, also figure out, even if you plan out everything, if there's likely interruptions that you don't have as much control over in the mornings, then also allocating time to account for that. So essentially, if you do that, then you make a plan that's more likely to work effectively in the mornings. You can do the same thing with getting started on the workday or the evening routine to get to bed. I mean, a lot of times I work a lot with people on the idea, oh, I want to get to bed and get enough sleep, but things keep popping up and it takes me a long to get ready for bed. And then it's far later. Then suddenly I realize I really need to get to bed and I've already wasted so much extra time and can't get enough sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. All of these drugs. So, and are you having people set timers too? Like, do you have other little tactics in there? Because I feel like here we go again with the plan. Like it's helpful to have the plan, but if they don't feel like they're ever adhering to it.
Right. One of the first questions I ask people when they mention trouble with getting to bed on time is obviously asking them what time they want to be asleep by. And then from there, you have to work backwards to figure out roughly how long does it take you to fall asleep? And so what time do you need to actually get into bed by? And then from there to figure out how long do you actually need to get ready for bed. And in terms of creating the awareness of it, anyone that has an iPhone, the health app, there's the sleep setting where basically you can set how much sleep you want and then you can get a reminder of a wind down time. So this way it prompts you to start getting ready for bed at a certain time. So I think, I use that a lot, or sometimes people will set alarms separately from that when it's time to disconnect from what they're doing to start getting ready for bed. But I think that can definitely help a lot because a lot of times it's not really paying close enough attention to time because you don't have to be anywhere at a certain time. I often tell people, think about sleep as an appointment that you have to attend on time and regularly. And then it becomes sort of a priority as opposed to just being whatever time's left in the day.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. Hey, you're mentioning iPhones, and maybe this is a good time to ask this. Do you have an opinion or thoughts or studies for us on, is there any watch outs with devices and that affecting an ADHD brain differently? Anything that you'd bring up in that topic?
The way that they're designed, you get instant sort of gratification. And I think it can be hard to block out distractions because there's always something that could be popping up if you're on the device or if it rings or vibrates. And so the idea is you want undivided sort of focus time. Use the do not disturb feature. The same thing if you have an Apple Watch, turn on do not disturb so you're not constantly getting alerts from things because then you're somewhat more able to focus better. Whereas if your brain is so used to constantly being interrupted over time, that probably does make it a lot harder to be able to focus. And there's certainly a lot of benefits of, an iPhone and electronic devices in terms of, setting automated reminders, being able to organize your day and have, something remind you of something without having to ask a human to do it.
Yes.
I think it's great because it increases independence for kids and teens as well. So there's a lot of benefits, but at the same time, there's getting stuck in whether it's scrolling on social media or even on the news app. that for stuff that it's not time limited, it's very easy to get sucked into the phone and lose track of time, especially on the apps that hide the clock.
Yes, I didn't know that. They do hide the clock. There's apps.
Certain ones, like I think Instagram maybe. There are some social media ones, I think. But what's interesting is I think by law, certain social media platforms have to have like a timer option. I mean, it's not activated automatically, and I almost never advertise it. But for example, Instagram, if you go in on the settings, there's a thing where it lets you set a certain amount of time where it'll prompt you and remind you after you've been on for a certain number of minutes. When it first came out, they used to let you do it for 1 minute or 5 minutes, because I think I tested out and set it for 5 minutes. And then I think at some point I think had deactivated that, but I think because I had it set initially for that, it still pops up and lets me do it. But I think they have like 30 minutes now is like the minimum or something.
Interesting. I like that. This is just, again, boundaries. Like what is a great tool also needs some boundaries set around it. So, which again, very individualized on how somebody's approaching that. I want to jump over to a whole different topic for a minute. That's 2 words, and tell me if you use them or your thoughts around them. This idea of where energy is spent in the day, and effortful energy and effortless energy. Do you use that at all? Do you talk around that?
I mean, not directly in those terms. The concepts, I think, are ones I focus on a fair amount in terms of the idea of thinking about the time of day that maybe you function most optimally to focus. So, for example, if you have, I don't know, something that requires a lot of sort of sustained mental energy or effort that you need to use, for some people, they work a lot better in the mornings. Others work better in the afternoon. But to sort of allocate time at the times of day you're most likely to sort of do best. Like same thing, like let's say writing task, for example. Like something that really requires a lot of focus. Trying to do that when you're super tired first thing in the morning or at the end of the day when you're tired, you're probably not going to be quite as productive with it. If you have control over your schedule, think about working out. Some people can work out any time of day pretty much, and they get a similar workout. For others, they work out too early in the morning, they're not awake enough, and they don't get the same level of benefit. They don't break a sweat as much. They don't push it as much as they would if they did like later in the day. And so I think for each type of activity, to the extent that you have control over it, figure out what is the ideal time of day for you to do that activity. And that will help with putting the energy and the time in to doing that activity most productively. I also,
Right.
there are probably some tasks that, are probably not entirely mindless, but are probably not super taxing mentally. And those are probably good tasks to do if you need to be working, but need a break from the heavier sort of focused tasks, or towards the end of the day, if you can get yourself to do them, then if you're less likely to be as focused. Essentially, the types of tasks that the time it takes to do them is not going to be drastically different based on how focused and tired you are.
Yeah. Okay. So, but definitely worth paying attention to.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I think the idea of being intentional with your time is crucial because, no matter sort of how good you are at planning, you still only have the same amount, you only have 24 hours a day to fit in everything you need, including sleep.
Great. No, we all can benefit. I was curious because we were talking about social media. I struggle to type ADHD professionals out there, and I think it's so good. Like their visual posts that they stick out. It's like, that's me type of thing. But sometimes the tips aren't always there, or the tricks. Like, what's your favorite place to really understand if somebody didn't have you all the time? Where else do you send them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best resources for stuff in ADHD is CHAD, so chad.org. It's a national organization that really focuses on kids and adults with ADHD. It's a very well-regarded organization. They have Attention Magazine, which is, I guess, a bi-monthly magazine that comes out in print and electronic format. They have these toolkits on their website where you can go based on categories. So for kids, adults, parenting, teachers, or education, they have like a huge wealth of resources, and they have various newsletters throughout the month that come out. So there's resources on what's the current research on things. Here, what are practical strategies for different kinds of things. You can go through the database of old articles as well. So there's great resources on pretty much anything you could think of with ADHD. It's also evidence-based. Whatever is produced them, it's clear that it's been vetted. Because I think what's hard is when you look on social media, you have no idea what's being recommended and cited, and is there any evidence behind it? Is the information about statistics even accurate? And so I think going with a reputable organization like CHAD is really helpful because it allows you to make sure that whatever you're seeing presumably is accurate.
Right. 100%. No, thank you. I will put all of that in the show notes. You do virtual appointments, right?
Yeah, I think I'm up to I think I can see people in about 40 states now. I have a thing called SciPact, and basically lets me see people in whatever states participate, and they keep adding states. So I think we're up to about 40 now. So it's definitely great to be able to work with people all over the place.
Yes, that's amazing. And would they just visit your website to investigate initial appointment?
Yeah, I try to keep things as streamlined as possible. So if you go to hellerpsychologygroup.com, there's a form at the bottom of the first page, and you can basically fill out a contact form and I'll get back to you. Or you can basically click directly to an online portal to book an initial call.
Okay. And they don't have to see you personally ever. Like you really can just be virtual the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, majority of people I see is pretty much all virtual. So it's definitely very convenient because for kids and teens, they can basically do it between homework and they're already in their own environment to work on stuff, which makes it a lot easier. And same thing with adults, where it's, some adults do it during the workday, some do it after work. But this way, they just have to focus on time equipment. They don't have to worry about travel time or anything else.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? I felt like that really helped with people not showing to appointments because when you take away all the distractions of traffic, extra time getting places, to just show up to your computer makes such a big difference. So
Yeah,
I
no, I think it
love
definitely does. It cuts down on no-show rates a lot. And also, years ago, when I would sort of see people in the office, if someone's really running late, I'd end up doing a virtual session anyway, if they're running really late. So it's nice because usually if someone hasn't logged on within a couple of minutes, I reach out to them and usually get in touch pretty fast. And then, so in most cases, even if someone's completely forgotten, then they can log on pretty quickly and still get most of the session in.
session. Yeah, that makes sense. That's so good. Do you do other things like courses or programs? What else do you offer?
Sure. So I do an executive functioning boot camp, which is basically, a 2 hour session where it's really focused on the idea of kind of looking at everything we can in depth. So really looking at planning, time management for adults, focusing on stuff with work, stuff at home. And so basically we spend time kind of brainstorming, working more on the self-awareness, and then we put together a plan on what to do going forward. So it's a good way to jumpstart or fine-tune skills and have a plan. Obviously, for a lot of people, the follow through is just as hard. And so, I do, even with the boot camp, I offer follow-up sessions just because a lot of times it's helpful to kind of check in and keep working at stuff beyond kind of the initial plan. But so I do the boot camp. I have a new meetup group that I've been running recently where it's basically a monthly executive functioning boot camp for adults. I think the next one's on next Thursday, the 9th. And
This
pretty
is
much just, if you go to meetup.com and just type in executive functioning boot camp, it should come right up.
okay. And they could find that on your website as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on the
Okay.
website under groups. And then I also run an ADHD dads group that meets monthly. And so that's also through meetup.com.
Do you like the groups? Like how does that run? Do you have people come in with questions initially and you just guide through it, or is it just kind of open format? What's that look like?
I think it depends. A lot of times it's go around, people introduce themselves briefly, talk about, very briefly, like what they want to get out of the group, the reason they're here. And then if someone has questions, we'll start with that and kind of answer. And usually it just evolves into a great dialogue, which is very interactive. So people kind of stay engaged because we're talking back and forth, sharing ideas, time, but people's sort of difficulties. And so I think you get the camaraderie and the peer support, as well as
Mhm.
also getting practical strategies you come away with what to do. And so I mean, it's definitely nice to have that. And it's also great that I can offer that because it gives me a lot of flexibility in addition to all the stuff through the office to offer something that's lower cost and that's easier to access because literally you basically go on meetup.com, hit the button to sign up, pay the very small fee, and then you can have access to the meeting. And so it's great because for some people that just don't have the time or financial resources to do something that's more in depth, it's a great way to get some support.
Oh, I love that. And do you also find that even your one-on-ones will take advantage of the group support as just bonus time with you and community?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person and the presenting issues. But yeah, I think when it's a good fit, certainly people can. 'Cause I think that while obviously the individual stuff, I think is great for working on a lot of things. I think obviously you can't really give the communal support in a one-on-one session in the same way. So I think that's really something I think a lot of people get benefits out of doing group stuff as well as the individual work. I also think it's hard because I think there's some people that get a lot out of the group environment, but others need that one-on-one attention to really look at minute details of things. And that's where I think sometimes it can be hard to sort of get, as much out of a group. Or you get the strategies, but you still need more help with implementation than you can get in a group setting.
Right. Right. And I'm sure not everybody's insurance pays, but do you take insurance?
I
If
don't participate directly with insurance, but all the call it therapy or coaching, it's all under the same umbrella. So it's all would be considered out of network so that if you have benefits, you can potentially get some reimbursement for all the services.
Gotcha. Wonderful. Thank you. And just for our listeners' purposes, all of this will be in the show notes in case you're out running or walking. What am I not asking you that I should be?
I mean, I guess one thing is that a lot of times with ADHD, for example, a big focus is on medication as a treatment modality.
Mm,
And so, I mean, first of all, I think it depends on the person, but I think medication can be very helpful in a lot of circumstances. I think the caveat to that, though, is that I think people don't realize that the medication helps a lot with direct focus and can make it easier to implement strategies and improve self-regulation, but it doesn't magically give you the underlying executive function skills. And so even with medication, you often need, or is highly beneficial, both for kids and adults, to work on these practical strategies and tools, because otherwise you may be able to be focused, but you're still probably not going to be drastically better organized.
Right. Yes. Yet. The power of yet, right?
Right.
Yes. It's a skill. You got to work on that. No, that's a really good point. And do you also hear, though, that patients say that once a medication is there, that now it feels tangible to work on that new skill set, like that they get some reprieve of, oh, this is so much easier?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the person, but yeah, there are definitely a lot of people that experience it as being easier to do it. I mean, the hard part though is for most people, it can't be on medication 24 hours a day. And so you also have to learn, how do you compensate for the times of day when the medication's not there? So when it's kicking in first thing in the morning, or, because it can impact sleep, most people don't have medication in their system late at night. And so how do I sort of deal with all this stuff when the time the medication wears off? But it also becomes about, how do I also plan based on that to figure out what are things I need to get done while the medication is in my system?
Right. Right. Which kind of goes back to that whole like effortful, effortless, or like prioritizing the time in the day when our energy is appropriate to knock things
Exactly. I
out.
mean, one common example would be folding laundry. It can be time intensive based on how much laundry you have, but that probably is a good task to do later in the evening, because mental brain power needed to fold laundry is not that high compared to a lot of other tasks. Plus, it's also off a screen. And so, doing that before bed, if you have to do household stuff, is probably better than paying bills right before bed.
Right. Or if grocery shopping is totally overwhelming you, do it during that time where you feel fresh and ready to focus, right? So,
Right. But also, think outside the box sometimes too with that. So, for example, it's not just about the time of day, but what other options exist? So, for example, some grocery stores, you can order through an app. So you see exactly what you're ordering. You also then keep the cost in mind because you see what it is before you check out. And then you go and, drive and, get in line and then you pick up the groceries. Or obviously there's some that do delivery services as well. So it's also, there's different ways to sort of save time sometimes also. And, some of them have very nominal, or some places don't really charge any fee for, if you do pickup.
great. Thank you. You just said this, that sometimes it's like oh, why didn't I think of that? Because literally just having this conversation the other day, with cost being part of the grocery trip, and without me physically being there and grocery shopping with somebody. However, we can screen share and look at a grocery list online. So duh, I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. All right. If our listeners heard nothing else out of you today, what's the one thing that you like hope and pray that they did hear?
That I would say, think about the stuff we talked about today and maybe pick one or two concrete strategies or ideas that you want to take away from today and start implementing on your own. Because it's great to listen to all these things and try to make things better, but figuring out, how do you take action to do that? And so that's where, pick one or two things we talked about and write it down in some way, whether it's in the notes app or somewhere else right now, or maybe the reminders app, somewhere that you're going to go back to, or a piece of paper on your desk somewhere. This way you can remember this to then go back and make a plan on how to execute it. Because you not only need to have an idea of here's what I want to do, but how are you going to execute it? And so taking the time, if you have a few minutes right after you're listening to this, to make a plan for how are you going to execute whatever the strategy is. So for example, if it's, I don't know, not letting the laundry pile up as much, maybe think about, is there a set time of day each week you're going to do laundry? Or if it's really stressful when the laundry piles up, could you do laundry for different people in the household on different days of the week, so that instead of doing 10 loads of laundry on a weekend, you're doing maybe one or two each day and then folding it as it gets done? Because if you allow enough time before you go to bed to fold the laundry, then the laundry's not going to pile up. Mm-hmm. So essentially, just having that plan and writing it out can then make it a lot easier to follow through on.
Thank you. That was such a great example. And when we say create an action step, like now, right? The power of now, that don't wait for an hour once you're done listening to this and then think you'll come back to it. Because I don't care who you are. We all forget. So, yes. Oh, thank you, Carrie. I really, really appreciate you. And truly, thank you for coming back on and sharing your time with us.
You're very welcome. No, I appreciate having me back. It's definitely fun chatting. It's a really great podcast. And it's definitely fun listening to some of the episodes, and a great podcast. So I definitely hope it continues for a long time, because I think it's a really valuable resource to people.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the kind words.